Throughout the Friday the 13th franchise, Jason's face has been shown on film countless times, but there are some movies in the series where the filmmakers neglected to show his face for whatever reason. In this series, we are going to dive deep into those films and show you what Jason did look like under his trademark hockey mask. Then we'll give you our opinion on where in the movie would have been a great spot for a Jason face reveal. Join us now for a series we are calling Jason Unmasked. Before we begin, if you haven't checked out the previous episodes where we covered Jason's face in Jason Goes to Hell and Jason X, be sure to check them out. A link to the Jason Unmasked playlist will be in the description below. In this episode of Jason Unmasked, we will be covering the film Freddy vs. Jason. Freddy vs. Jason released on August 15th, 2003. Directed by Ronnie Yu and written by Mark Swift and Damian Shannon, the film went on to gross a total of $116 million on a reported $30 million budget. Jason Voorhees this time around was played by Ken Kirzinger, thus ending Kane Hodder's streak of playing Jason. There's been much debate over the years of why Kane Hodder was recast as Jason, but for the sake of this video, I'm not going to dive into that. Perhaps that will be a different video at a later date. Fun fact, this isn't the first time Ken Kirzinger was in a Friday the 13th film, or even the first time we've seen him on screen as Jason Voorhees. Ken Kirzinger appeared in Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. You can see him as the cook in the diner scene when Jason throws him into the mirror, but he also doubled as Jason in 2 stunts. When Jason gets tackled coming out of the subway car and gets electrocuted on the tracks, and, most notably, when Rennie hits Jason with the cop car. In Freddy vs. Jason, Jason wears black pants. He must have also gotten cold because he wears 3 layers on his upper body. A bluish-gray sweater that is ripped and hanging down, revealing a blue sweater underneath. On top of them, he wears a big burlap jacket. Black leather gloves complete his costume. Jason's head looks rather normal, but for some reason his flesh has turned a darker color. Perhaps his flesh is slowly decaying over the years. He also has a big patch of hair on one side of his head. His hockey mask is pretty pristine, as there isn't any damage from the previous films. I'm sure the filmmakers wanted to reset Jason's look for the film and not have some beaten up hockey mask. But the only way to explain this away would be that when Jason is resurrected from hell in the beginning of the film, a new mask was manifested for him. I don't know, just guessing. Freddy vs. Jason plays through its 98-minute runtime without showing Jason's face. We get a small glimpse of his mouth area when Kia attempts to give Jason mouth-to-mouth while in the van, but as I've said before, we want a full face reveal to the audience, and perhaps even the characters in the scene. During any scene where Jason is wearing his mask, the actor portraying him is usually wearing a mask that is commonly called a hood. The face of the mask is usually cut out so the actor does not have to wear any unnecessary effects on his face, and so they can remove the hockey mask between takes, which will allow them to catch their breath, eat, drink, etc. This is what actor Ken Kirzinger looked like on set with the hockey mask off. So, what does Jason's face look like in Freddy vs. Jason? Just like Jason X, Jason's face was designed and sculpted for Freddy vs. Jason. I think there was a planned reveal of Jason's face for the movie, but for whatever reason it was cut out. Here are some pre-production designs on what Jason and his face was going to look like in the film. This photo comes from Jason Lives Since 1980's blog, which shows a behind-the-scenes shot of Ken Kirzinger in full Jason face makeup sitting in the van where Kia attempts mouth-to-mouth. Perhaps they were planning on having his mask come off when he sits up right before the van crashed? Who knows? But this is a cool, rare shot nonetheless. This sculpt was made by Fear of the Dark Studios, and I think closely resembles the face of Jason in Freddy vs. Jason. The photos of this sculpt give us a much clearer look at Jason's face. As we can see, Jason's skin color is now even darker, Perhaps it's from being burned over the years, or perhaps it's just decaying and turned a nasty color. I don't know, but it's gross. Jason's right eye is slightly closed as it's his bad eye. His teeth stick out slightly from the mouth, which is rather close to how Jason looked when he was unmasked in Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter. In fact, based on the shape of his head, I feel like this look of Jason is actually pretty close to the final chapter look, be it with much darker flesh and random patches of hair. I think Fear of the Dark Studios did a great job with this sculpt. Now that we know what Jason's face looked like under his hockey mask, the next question is, where in Freddy vs. Jason should they have shown Jason's face to the audience? I personally think there could have been a few good spots for a Jason face reveal in Freddy vs. Jason. The first good spot would have been during the first fight scene between Freddy and Jason. This first battle takes place in Freddy's dream world, so Freddy had the upper hand and could have done anything he wanted to Jason, including taking his mask. There is a part where Jason turns into a little boy in the dream and Freddy takes off his mask, and we are treated to the face of a young Jason. This scene could have played out all the same, but perhaps instead, Freddy removes Jason's mask before he turns into a young boy. Jason gets scared by the water shooting down between him and Freddy. This would have been a great spot for Freddy to do something and remove his mask before making more water pour down on Jason. He could have even said something about him being ugly, perhaps even just made a disgusted face. Then, after Jason turns into a young boy, Freddy would follow it with his line that appears in the movie, "Now there's a face only a mother would love." How would Jason get his hockey mask back after this reveal? Well, this spot wouldn't really matter if we saw how he got his mask back, as it's just a dream. After this scene, Jason wakes up in the real world and all would be good. Another good spot, in my opinion, for a Jason face reveal would have been that van scene I spoke about earlier. Kia can attempt her mouth-to-mouth on Jason as it plays out in the film. However, when Jason sits up, his mask could fall off and reveal his full face to everyone inside the van. The shock of him coming awake causes them to crash the van. Well, add Jason's face in there and it would really make them crash that van. How would Jason get his mask back after this reveal? The most simple answer would be that when Jason is ejected from the van during the crash, his mask could go along with him. Not too long after the crash, there is a shot of Jason walking in the woods. Before this shot, there could have been a small insert of Jason picking up the mask from the ground and placing it back on his face. With one minor tweak, Jason's face would have made a huge shock for the audience. It would have also kept the tradition of showing Jason's face at some point in the movie. Freddy vs. Jason, in my opinion, is a great film. I think the younger generation sometimes writes it off as dumb, but I attribute it to them not being old enough to enjoy the experience of when Freddy vs. Jason hit the movie theaters. It was huge. When the trailer released for it, I must have watched it 100 times. And when the movie released, I went and saw it 3 times in the theater on opening weekend. Every time I went, the theater was sold out. If you don't like the movie, give it another chance. You might enjoy it a little bit more now that you're older. Also, if you want to read about the history of the making of Freddy vs. Jason and learn about all the unused screenplays that were written for the film, I recommend checking out Slash of the Titans, The Road to Freddy vs. Jason by Dustin McNeil. I'll leave a link to the Amazon page for it in the description for this video. There is lots of interesting information on the movie, and in my opinion, I think the movie we ended up with is probably the best script we could have gotten for having 2 icons battle it out on the big screen. I wish they would have made a sequel to Freddy vs. Jason. There were talks, but obviously nothing ever happened. Maybe one day. So, what do you think of Jason's face in Freddy vs. Jason? Where do you think would have been a great spot in the movie for a reveal of his face? Let us know what you think in the comments. You've all been leaving some awesome comments with some great ideas. Keep it up. That is it for this installment of Jason Unmasked. Up next, Friday the 13th, 2009. If you enjoyed this video, would you kindly like and subscribe?